So welcome to our November Crescendo Connect conversation. Happy Veterans Day. My name is Lisa Griebel. I'm president of Crescendo Inc. It's always so nice to see all these EI practitioners on our calls. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Before we begin, I am going to set the context for our Crescendo Connect conversations. The purpose of these conversations is to provide you with an opportunity to learn more about how our practitioners are building emotional intelligence into their practices. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Janice Downing as our guest speaker. And I've invited Janice to share her expertise working with intercultural agility and emotional intelligence. So as you listen to her presentation, I encourage you to think about how you might make your own connections to intercultural agility and emotional intelligence. But before we get started, I'd like to do just a quick review of the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence. And I'm going to bring it up on our screen. It should be one of the handouts that I sent you earlier this week. MHS, Multi Health Systems, who is the publisher of the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence, defines EI as being a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. EI, emotional intelligence, of course, is at the core of this model, and it's surrounded by these 15 emotional competencies or EI skills. And we like to think of these skills as really being the building blocks for developing or further enhancing our overall emotional and social functioning. So this is the outer ring of the model, our overall well-being, as well as our overall performance. Starting with self-perception, generally speaking, people that have a good sense of who they are, their strengths and their limitations, or self-awareness, they directionally have a good sense of where they want to take their lives, so self-actualization, and they feel pretty confident in the skills that they're bringing to the party. So they have a strong self-perception, likely will be able to express themselves in constructive ways, or self-expression. And being able to express ourselves constructively will contribute to our ability to be able to develop and maintain mutually satisfying relationships, or interpersonal. But also having a good sense of how emotions play out inside of us will contribute to our ability to be able to make better decisions as well as manage our stress. Again, thinking about these 15 emotional competencies as being the building blocks that will help us in further developing or enhancing our overall emotional and social functioning, our overall well-being, and our overall performance is how we like to think about this model. So with emotional intelligence as our backdrop, I am so excited to welcome and introduce Janice Downing, who is a friend and a colleague that joined our EI practitioner community when she was EQI certified back in 2020 or 2012. Janice is a consultant and owner of Common Sense Consulting at Work and has more than 30 years of experience as a broad human resource professional. She is a certified consultant in human systems dynamics, which enables her to assess an organization's issues and facilitate change in a systematic and cost-effective manner. Janice works with organizations large and small across industry lines to help identify the root cause of a problem, followed by developing and implementing human resource solutions that achieve the desired outcomes of her clients. Today, Janice is going to introduce us to the we space and make the connection between intercultural agility and emotional intelligence. Honestly, given the reality of our world, the world that we're living in right now, this topic is incredibly relevant and timely. And I think Janice is the best person to help us learn more about this topic. So please join me in welcoming Janice Downing as today's Crescendo Connect presenter. Janice?
Thank you, Lisa. When Lisa and I began to imagine what this session could be, it was really fun and interesting to find the connections between EI and IA. And I will get to intercultural agility in just a moment. But I want to welcome you all to this session, and I want you to know that I really am humbled to be asked to participate in today's session. And as we work together during this time, I want to make sure that I am clear with you about the fact that I'd like to begin the session by talking about the context for our conversations. So I want you to know that I believe that everyone has their own unique point of view and their own experiences. And that if I provide definitions or context about things and they are my opinion, they are meant to offer and serve as a reference point or a tool. The most important thing to me is that we'll be able to have a rich and meaningful discussion that is open and honest, and it builds trust. That's where we start. So I don't have any more, any less than you. You have just as much as I do. And I want us to be able to co-create this space and this time that we share together. So I wanted to be able to give you that context. I would like to begin this session with an exercise that I call cultural introductions. My team and I use this, and it's really fun. So typically we as individuals will go up and introduce ourselves to people. And when we do that, the way we do that is to be able to say, my name is, and here's my title. Here's where I work. This is what I do. And I'd like to take that off the table. What I'd like us to do instead is select from things, and I've given you a list to start from. You don't have to use this list. You can make up your own. But I want to offer to you that we might want to talk about our birth order or our generation. Which generation do we belong to? How do we identify by race? What are our spiritual beliefs, etc.? And so I can see that this is one of those, what? Wait, what? Okay, so what I want you to be able to do is select from a few items. So pick one or three, right? And then you're going to have a moment to prepare so that you can introduce yourself in a way. And these are just examples of what you might say to another person. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and let you read through the examples. And then I will ask you if you need more time or if you're good. So read through the examples. I'll be quiet and then I'll check in with you. Okay, you look pretty ready. All right, let me give you one more example. I'm going to do mine. I'm the firstborn of two in my family. My mother was one of 12 children born to my grandmother. I have 75 cousins, first generation cousins, and we are incredibly close. And as long as I've lived in Minnesota, which has been over 30 years, it is not my home, it is where I live. My home is Philadelphia, where my family lives. Because when I am at home, I don't have to minimize any way that I communicate, whether it's through conflict or my expressive use of my hands, and my intensity of using my voice. And storytelling is just fine. I am a self-proclaimed foodie. I love to cook, and my greatest joy comes from being with my family and cooking with love. That's how it's done. And so I'd like you to not write a script like you see right now. I would like you to simply choose a few items from that list that I had showed you before. And then I am going to, while you prepare and choose and start to think about what you want to say, we're going to do an exercise where I'm going to place you into a breakout room with another person. And you're going to introduce yourself. And then the other person is going to introduce themselves. And the way this will work is if your birthday was most recently passed and is closest to today, you are person A. And if you're in a room with three, right now it should just be two people in a room. But if through magic you end up in a room with three, then the person whose birthday is next becomes person B, and then C's turn. Is this making sense? I hope this is logical. So I'm going to give you up to 4 minutes to do this exercise, which seems like a long time, but it will not be a long time, I promise you. So when you are doing the introductions, please make sure that you avoid what you do professionally, words or phrases that describe your job or you identify a title from the past, how many years of service you have, what kind of schools you went to, any of that you would typically use to introduce yourself. And so I'm going to place you into pairs. The system might put you into triads, right? 2 people, and you're going to have just a minute or so to introduce yourself. And then when you're in the breakout room, I'm going to be holding time. So I will flash you a note that says, if you haven't already switched, switch. And then you'll pop out of the breakout room. Was it awkward? Was it fun?
I thought it was really fun because, you know, talking about different things other than career. And it was kind of hard to stay away from that. But once I started talking about my hobbies, and Jean was lovely and telling me a little bit about her family. So it was nice to know that's the kind of thing that I am interested in, and in other people anyways. Somebody once said that instead of asking people when you meet them, you know, what do you do? Asking them what is your passion? You know, which is far more interesting. So I really liked it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing, Joe. Anyone else? What was that like for you?
So I immediately felt curious, and I felt like I could be myself and show up in a very authentic way. And I received such a nice vibe from Joe. So I would love to talk more.
I can comment. It was enjoyable, number one. Number two, it was just different. I found myself, hopefully it came across somewhat intelligible to Jessie, but it felt like I was kind of stumbling. You know, it's just not the natural way you introduce yourself to someone. So it was not uncomfortable, just a little awkward.
Thank you, Marianne. One more. Anyone want to share? What was that experience like?
I thought it was inviting, I guess is the word that comes to mind, because it felt like it was inviting me into MJ's description of herself and her upbringing, and it made me want to know more about her. And so I think there was like this curiosity I was experiencing, as well as wanting to know her and see her through the lens of the things that she described as important to her.
Thank you, Sheila. And that is exactly where we want you to be And that's where we all need to be right now. So what you did was you co-created a we space. I gave you the boundaries. I told you what was out of bounds and what was in bounds. But then you use that because I said you get to select what you want to talk about in the we space. And you get to decide how you want to talk about it. I gave you lots of examples, but I didn't tell you what to do. And when we do that, we're using neuroscience because it allows us to relax, and it does tap curiosity. And it does invite us to relax. And it is awkward as all get out sometimes, Marianne, when we're co-creating space together, because it's like, I'm not in control. And it's like, okay, here's the thing. My girlfriend told me years ago, you are not in control. You just think you're in control. It's all how you navigate the space or the situation. And so I'm inviting you to co-create we spaces. Now, here's the thing about we space. Each time we get together, you co-create it. We may agree in this moment to use some of the agreements that we have previously used, but it's not like at work where you have a handbook and you're like, this is the way we're going to operate, and you know what the rules are. It's like, well, maybe those rules don't work. So we recreate the we space intentionally every time that we work together. And when we are working on the we space, then one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there are critical elements that are a part of that we space. And so in that we space, the critical elements really do fall in, once again, here we go. There we go. Psychological safety. And I want to be really clear about what psychological safety is. Psychological safety is really something that works for me and it works for you. It means that I have to feel abundantly safe, and so do you. It doesn't mean that I get to say whatever I want to whoever I want, however I want. Because remember, the space is co-created. I have to say what I need to say in a way that you can hear it, or I invite you to listen to it, and then I can adjust it from there. So I may say things, I may address conflict, and it might be super uncomfortable for you, but then we adjust from there once it's out. And this is designed so that we can create trust. It's really important for us to have trust with each other. Trust is co-created. So sometimes people say trust is you do what you say and you're consistent about your words and your actions being in alignment. And sometimes trust to other people really is about who you know. And if I know them and they trust you, then I trust you. If they don't know you, then I don't trust you. What are we talking about when we say trust? I'm going to throw in the second word that people always talk about, respect. It's not an element of the we space. We can talk about respect, but respect can look different to lots of people. So respect can be more like it's earned or it's given until it's breached. That's why it's not an element of we space, because it's something that is a perceived notion. Trust is built and maintained. People will say, well, respect is built and maintained. It's our perception around some of these other things that creates the terminology or the definition of respect. So I don't use it. You can if you'd like to, but I don't. I think compassion and empathy are huge in the we space. How I show up is really, really important. Now, I want you to think back to the elements of emotional intelligence. And when we think about the elements of emotional intelligence, the way that I demonstrate empathy and impulse control really helps me demonstrate compassion to others. Another way that we need to think about the we space is the free flow of communications. Do I hoard communications and use it as a power tool? Or do I share information and make sure that you have what I have so there's no surprises? And then I think it was Sheila that talked about curiosity, right? Just so curious, like you could just barely stop yourselves, right? That's when you know the we space is operating, right? You want to discover new experiences together. You want to co-create, you want to innovate, and you are highly engaged. That curiosity is almost on fire. It makes you do things that you wouldn't normally do. So when we do this exercise with clients and we're like, we're going to do the cultural introductions, so I usually get, I hate talking with people. This is awful, right? And then I usually get cranky faces when I pull them out of the break rooms. You were all very, very nice, Minnesota nice, right? No one gave me that look like, really? I did hear somebody say, we're getting kicked out now. That's pretty typical, right? When that exercise happens, because we've shifted your mindset. Your mindset is like, well, what else could be? What are the possibilities? How can I make this work? And then that two-way dialogue back and forth, not like Serena Williams playing tennis with her sister Venus, but it's one of those ways that we're able to communicate and make sure that you have what you need, I have what you need, and that we are sharing resources, etc. So that's a we space. And I want to make sure that you have that context for the we space because it is a bit different. Now, people will ask me, where the heck did that come from? I grew up in Philadelphia, as I mentioned before. I grew up in a community and at a time where people were incredibly different from one another. Ethnically, racially, people dressed different. They spoke multiple languages. It was okay to be different. And then I moved to Minnesota and it was like, you need to conform or you need to fit into the mainstream. And I could just never have it. I was just like, this is boring, right? And when people meet me, they're like, you're different. And I'm like, yes, I am. I own my uniqueness now. I'm really cool. And everywhere I go, everywhere I work, I create we space and people like it, right? And so I wanted to be able to give you that experience because it's not unique to me. It's just that's the way I know that people do their best work. And they are incredibly creative when they have a we space. Now, what I want to address, and Lisa asked me to, this slide keeps wanting to jump up, so now we can have it. I want to be able to say that sometimes people show up in the we space and they're in a change agent role. And we need change agents today. But there are different roles that people are playing as change agents. And sometimes these roles are judged. And I want you to know we need each one of these roles in order for our organizations, our society to continue to advance and move. So I'm going to start on the left and say there are individuals who are in a change agent role where they are instigating. And instigators basically say, you need to think about this, and this is why. For example, you need to think about the incarceration rates and how they seem to be very incredibly lopsided. Our systems are not working the way they should. And then there's an agitator role, which is different than an instigator. An agitator will say, I'm showing you the data and the trends and the patterns, and we continue to do this over and over and over again. When will we stop? When will we shift into a new normal that works for us? And then there are individuals who then can take that data and package it in such a way that it has a broader mass appeal to individuals and their advocates. So when you read an article or you watch a documentary and you think, that's exactly what I was thinking, and you start sharing it with other people, the person who did that article or that documentary is advocating on behalf of a thought. And then there are individuals who are making policies, procedural changes so that it works for all. That's a social justice change agent. And then there are individuals or organizations that are designed to make a systems change. So they're thinking about, how does economic wealth get tapped into education and vocation? And how can we make a pathway so that we get people from their education and their vocation so that they are able to build and sustain economic growth, wealth? So I just want to pause and see if you have questions about these, because I shifted really fast from here's the we space, and then people show up in the we space, and I'm just focusing in on change agents right now because people are like, what the heck is going on? What's going on? Like, this is what's going on, that people are showing up in that we space in a change agent role, and people don't understand that they are actually a part of a whole system of change. So questions, you can unmic, unmute.
My question is, are these sequential, or do we incorporate elements as change agents of each of these 5 agent characteristics?
They're unique roles, but we will move back and forth between different roles. So you can start in an organization or as a systems change agent, but then you might end up writing an article and becoming an advocate. Or in a meeting, you advocate for a certain piece as a change agent. Rarely do you show up as both. Otherwise, it looks like you're taking your hat and doing this back and forth, if that makes sense. Some people are really skilled at it. Glenda O. Young, she's good at using multiple roles, but most people will just do one at a time. Or you'll hear people say, especially this year, that's not my lane. My lane is advocacy, or that's not my lane. My lane is systems change. Other questions?
Could you speak briefly again about the difference between the instigator and the agitator again?
Absolutely. Do you have a back question to that, or you just want me to redo the definitions?
I'm just kind of curious. I'm just kind of trying to absorb the difference, really.
No problem. Absolutely. So instigators are individuals who are saying, are you paying attention to this? This seems to be broken. And they're describing what is broken.
Okay.
Agitators are looking at patterns and trying to help you understand, this happened 400 years ago. This happened 200 years ago. And it's happening right now. It's the same stuff. We're just calling it a different thing.
Okay, it's the scaling. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. These questions are wonderful. And I know Lisa, when Lisa and I were practicing and talking about this, she was like, I think you should slow down because you're just like giving so much information. And it's really fast and it's really new. So thank you for your questions. Anything else before I shift one more time? Okay. So what I want us to do is to not necessarily see these roles in a judgmental way. What I'd like us to do, and I'm inviting you to think about, these are just roles and they all have a place. And if we're able to tap into that curiosity and lean in, and we're actually able to think about, how do we ask those questions in such a way that it actually helps you understand And and Burl, I hope that it's okay if I use you as an example. Like, I was like, I just need to understand. Say it again. Like, help me make sure that I've got this, right? Or what's the difference again? Like, if we can do more of that, especially when people show up in the we space, and I was like, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. I often say, well, to clients, I understand what you said, but I don't get it. And so it's really important for us to be able to do that. And what I'd like to do is share with you a way that I have found actually helps with that leaning in or leaning back, expanding or contracting yourself so that you can walk alongside of, understand, and you're more effective in the we space. And so that is intercultural agility. And so, reference point for you, the Intercultural Development Inventory measures intercultural competence. Intercultural competence is your ability, your skill, your ability, your experiences, your knowledge to work when there are differences and commonalities at play. Intercultural agility is your ability to put intercultural competence into practice. So there's the competence piece. But to me, people will say, I'm super competent. And I'm thinking, no, not really. No. Right? It's just like when we have, people say, I'm emotionally intelligent. And you're thinking, oh dear. You absolutely have emotional intelligence. You just may not have as much of it as you think you do. Think about self-expression. Like some people will say, I'm gifted as an orator. I can get my thoughts across to people, and people really like to hear me talk. And I'm thinking, is that validated through the thoughts of others, or is that what you perceive it to be, right? And so intercultural agility is just like emotional intelligence. People will say, I'm really good at it. But being able to demonstrate it is really important. And so intercultural agility is your ability to shift and adapt your own behavior, your thoughts, your skills to create a bridge with others. So think you're in the we space and you're working with another person. Are you able to develop and maintain a strong working relationship that's based on mutual trust and respect? In other words, it's co-created. Mutual means it's co-created. And then we're able to successfully balance commonalities and differences. In order to do intercultural agility well, you have to be very culturally self-aware, meaning you know what you do know and you know what you don't know. And I'm really clear about there's so much that I have to learn. And I know when I'm going to step in it and mess it up. And I'm okay with being able to apologize because I don't have the level of cultural awareness that I need to. But I have a deep understanding of experiences of people from different cultural communities. So while I admit I have so much to learn, I also am really clear about the fact that I do have a base of knowledge that I'm going to continue to build, and that I understand perceptions and values, beliefs, behaviors, and practices, and then I can shift when I'm in a different culture. So when I leave the United States and go to another country, I'm thinking about what language do they speak? What languages do they speak? What are their cultural practices? Do I know so that I won't offend? Or am I willing to ask enough questions to figure it out? It doesn't mean I have all the answers. And doing intercultural agility well does not mean that you have all the answers. So, questions that you might have about intercultural agility. and then I can make some connection points.
I'm not sure if it's a question, Janice, and maybe maybe I should let you just do the connection points. But I guess I guess my question in a sense is, given that typically we as humans and people find comfort in homogeneity, I think that the challenge is, how do we, you were saying requires a deep, understanding and things like that. How do we even encourage people to embrace change or have a curiosity, to say the least, about people and things that are different from them, when that usually moves people into, out of their comfort level? Does that help? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So yes, I'm going to take what you said and bridge it, right? So from a neuroscience perspective, our brains are lazy. We have millions of pieces of information that we're processing on a given basis. And so what's really important is that we think about, how are we showing up in the we space? And if we are intentionally demonstrating or working to demonstrate intercultural agility, that means we won't let our brains shut off. We're going to try and demonstrate working in the highest context of the prefrontal cortex. So your brain, now the highest part, I'm pointing to the highest part of your brain here, operates. That prefrontal cortex allows us to do what you were saying, Beryl, where we're actually able to say to individuals, I'm tired today, and it's not you. And I do that as we're coming together, so that you don't think when I look like I'm zoning out that it has anything to do with you. And so I would equate that to self-expression in the EQI mindset. And then one of the other pieces that I will make a connection to is, we're dealing with a lot of complexity right now, and people are pretending like we're not. And so we have few shared agreements, and we do not have the understanding of how things are going to turn out. And so it's really important, if we're dealing with a lot of complexity, that we take the time to get as clear as we possibly can about what we're doing. And when we're doing that, we're actually trying to figure out, what are we trying to do while we're together? What is the shared agreement, and what is the expected outcome? And so that might mean that we have to use high levels of impulse control in the emotional intelligence realm, and lots of flexibility. So we really need to be able to do that. And I'm seeing in chat that and we're seeing things like, this requires vulnerability and some optimism and some reality testing. I'm going to hold myself together because I just want to go somewhere with that, but I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to say reality testing and being able to use empathy. So when I think of intercultural agility and I'm comparing it to emotional intelligence, I think that there are lots of comparisons that happen depending on different situations. And so what I'd like you to do is, there are questions that are listed for you, and I'd like you to just take a few moments and think about those 3 questions. And then I think we'll have enough time where I can ask you to respond to them. So just take a moment. I'll give you 2-3 minutes to answer those questions. I'll be quiet. Okay, I'm going to bring us back together again. But I'd like to be able to lean into this 3rd question. How can you, or do you, demonstrate intercultural agility so that you can maintain the highest level of we space? So I'm just going to reflect back a couple of the things that I heard people say so far, and then I'm going to ask you to add to chat or to speak out loud anything else you'd like to add. I heard approach things with curiosity, ask questions, vulnerability, humility, openness. These are things that people can demonstrate in a we space. Listen, validate, find common ground. There you go. And what I will say to you is that when you are intentional about doing one or two or three things as you are working with someone, that is the roadmap to creating a we space. It is a journey. It is an intentional thing. It's not one and done. It's like every time you show up, you are creating and maintaining that we space. So the time has flown so quickly. I appreciate having this opportunity to talk with you. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa because I know she has just a few things she wants to share with you. And then Lisa, the resources that I have, I will email to you because I'm not able to get them into chat. Sorry about that. So I will send those to you, Lisa, so that you can share with everyone. Hey, Amy, I see you.
That's perfect. I will make sure that they get included in the follow-up email that I send out later. So thank you, Janice. This has been just a really terrific overview of intercultural agility. And I say that knowing that my head is kind of spinning at the moment because it just feels like this is such a dense and important topic. And I am just still learning. And I really do appreciate your taking the time to do this conversation. And I really appreciate the really good examples that you gave. I think that helps with clarity. So thank you for all that. At this time, I'm going to invite our practitioners to join the conversation and invite you to share any observations or questions that you have for Janice. And be sure to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to Janice so she knows who she's talking to. But let's just see if there's anybody out there that has any questions that you'd like to explore, comments, observations.
I'll speak. I'm curious about the connection.
Oh,
The
Jean?
connection. Yeah, I'm curious about the connection of what we covered today and how valuable to organization. And I actually don't even know if it's possible to answer that at this moment, but that's what's coming to my mind is we see the value. We have this slant in the way we're thinking. And then there's perhaps business organizations who might not quite get that connection importance of what this is. So any thoughts?
My clients really think about this in terms of culture. So their we space is the culture that they create that allows ingenuity and engagement and performance and results in retention. So they actually do see that. And the more practical way is that when people aren't demonstrating intercultural agility and can't ask for questions, they actually start judging, and then biases start to play, and that impacts performance management. So if I see somebody, and Amy mentioned this in the chat, there's multiple ways to perceive how people are showing up, and if you can find the right way to ask without judgment, you can usually better understand why a person is showing up. And then you can flex or you can hold the boundary. So complex answer to a simple question. But as Lisa said, this is pretty complex, but they do see the value.
Mhm.
Hi, my name is Bill. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm unmuted. I apologize. I showed up 20 minutes late because my flight was late, and that's my excuse. And you may have covered this already, but it seems to be one of the greatest obligations we have as folks who work in organizations with people and teams is to do our homework. We really have to study more than we may do normally to understand the company, the business, the organization, the people, the group that we're working with, and really study in depth so we know best how to match behaviors and create that we space that you're talking about. I have failed so many times in the past where I've gone in just blundering because of my own esteemed intellect and find myself dead wrong when I talk to people, and really have to be willing to listen, sit back and learn from them as much as possible right away, but primarily to do my homework going in. And that means read, and to reach out to folks very different from myself before I go to someplace to make the most impact. So that was just my thought. You probably already covered that. I apologize if you did.
No, I did not. And
Thank
I would say it's research, ask, right? And so you're taking information, you're like, this is what I see, describing what you see, what you think, because that helps you get what I call under the hood. It's like, yeah, we talked about all of this, and then something else crops up, right? And you're like, what is that? By asking those questions, not assuming, to seeking to understand, you have all the information you need to help the organization shift forward. But you're right, Bill, it's on us to help them get there, and clients will resist that. They're like, we don't have time for that. Just get on it. It's like, oh, you want us to, slow it down and do it right.
And every organization that I work with has its own unique culture, whether they know it or not. When you walk in the front door, it's palpable. You can feel it, you can see it, you just sense what that culture is. And that's part of the initial ongoing learning experience we have to really understand what that culture is and to impact it appropriately.
Absolutely.
I'm seeing a comment. I'm seeing a comment here from Debbie Flanagan saying that I recently certified in IDI, and now I realize the importance of emotional intelligence in being able to move your intercultural forward. And I would echo that, Debbie. Thank you for that comment. The IDI is the Intercultural Development Inventory, and Janice just did my debrief of this yesterday. It is absolutely fascinating, and the insights that I gained in terms of the connection to emotional intelligence and the EI competencies, and how there just is such a good flow between the two, and we need to have both to be successful. So thank you very much. We have time for, we've gone over time a little bit here, but I think that it was well worth it. So I think we've got time for at least one more question. If anybody has one and wants to jump in, otherwise, I do want to be respectful of your time, and we'll be ending this conversation shortly. Anybody else have one last question? Okay.
Lisa, I'm sorry. If nobody has a question, I want to just lean into what Joe said. I think what Bill was saying about not jumping into the organization and telling them what to do before you really do your research, it's the same thing within a community. So communities are asking people to contract, learn like a sponge, then expand before people jump in and do and take over, especially in Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC communities. It's like, I want to help you. It's like, don't save, contract, learn, expand, step alongside, walk alongside, resource, but don't try and fix. So I'm like, yes, Joe.
Perfect. That's really valuable information, Janice. So thank you for sharing that piece of it. And I am going to thank you for sharing all of your experience or much of your experience in applying the EI to the intercultural agility. I think that it's a really valuable topic, and perhaps you and I should talk offline about a follow-up session to this, because I think we have a lot of interested people in this particular topic. So I'm going to move us towards the wrap on this session. And again, thank you, Janice, and thank all of the people that jumped on the call. I'm really grateful for that. We have just such a terrific community. And I'm proud of the Crescendo Connect Conversations. We've been doing this for many, many years and have many conversations that you can go back to and listen to and continue to learn. But it is one of the benefits that we think of when we're working with our EI practitioners. And additionally, people that are certified by Crescendo will have access to the practitioner only resource center through our website and exclusive discounts to Crescendo sponsored training programs. This was our last Crescendo Connect of 2020. And when I send the follow-up note for this session, I'll include links to this whole year's presentations for you. We're going to kick off our 2021 Crescendo Connect series on January 13th with a presentation from Liz Backus, a good friend and colleague, and she's going to be focusing on emotional intelligence and age-wise caregiving. It's another one of these very relevant and timely topics. You'll get an announcement on that in the next few weeks. And as a reminder, if you are making the EI connection in your own practice and are willing to share with this community, I really want to hear from you, because I love tapping this wisdom. It's just so incredibly powerful. So you will, as I said, you'll get access to this Crescendo Connect along with the others in our library. And then I will also invite you to share feedback on a evaluation survey. Janice and I are going to stay on the line here for a couple minutes. If you have any additional questions, and just thank you so much for your participation. We look forward to connecting with you again for our next Crescendo Connect conversation. Have a good rest of the year, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.